the introductions with Madden, people like Liz and Howard Johansson, the cam grinder, and his wife, they were the sweetest people I've ever known. They took care of us, whatever we needed. They didn't give us any sponsor money, but I suspect they would have if we'd asked them. We just never asked them. I would say something like, Madden says we need a new set of tires, and they would show up. Because Liz would call Ernie Hashem and the tires would show up. Stuff like that. I mean, they were really first-class people. And remember that this was an era of drag racing where it was just changing from a participant sport to a spectator sport. And because of the need to get people in the stands, the drag racing got more and more expensive because the promoter had to get something of an attraction to get the people in the stands. And as a result, sponsors came to the fore. Tommy Greer was probably the first sponsor that spent whatever it took to win with the Greer Black and Prudhomme car. The guys that owned OCMP, Orange County Metal Processing, they were sponsors. All the way back to Nesbitt's Orange, there were sponsors, but now in the 65, 66 era, it's starting to get serious. And the funny cars, which started out with just altered wheelbase 62 Plymouths, made leaps and bounds into the racing world. And as a result, they were stealing some of the thunder from the top fuel cars, which up to that had been the major attraction. And so you had to have a full body, you had to have it all painted up slick. It was more important to do that than to really perform well, because you made the paper, you made the cover, you made all these things happened to you when you had a really nice car, and there were really nice cars out there that couldn't piss a drop, but they got coverage. And then there was other guys that really made nice looking cars that really hauled ass, and Ivo for sure, the Greek, Jerry Baltus at Crochet Baltus and Lovato, they ran good. I think the last killer car without a nose on it was Surfer Tom here. That car was head and shoulders above everything out there for the period of time that from the time they learned how to do it, which didn't take them very long, till the time they quit, they were in charge. And they won some heavy-duty meets. And Madden, it turns out, was the guy who called them surfers the first time. Tom would come to the races in light blue jeans, white socks, and those U.S. Kid white-rimmed tennis shoes, and an OP shirt or something like that. And they pushed the car down the push road to fire it up during the warm-up period in the afternoon, and that sucker come around the corner going, blah, 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 and they're tearing the earth up. Madden says, "Who the hell are them surfers?" Right? So I can't swear to the fact that that was the particular time when they got the name. But Madden was in the habit of doing that kind of stuff. He would name people, him and Donovan had names for everybody. And it was really something. We had such a good time, and we'd bend up push rods and spend a half hour trying to get one intake push rod out of the motor when we had to make the next round. I mean, it was great fun. Lots of people pitching in to help. Drag racing was a community effort at that point. It was more important for two guys to race than it was to win. In other words, if the guy you were racing was hurt, you'd just as soon help him and wait for him than you would go out there, and you were only restrained by the promoter's effort to get you out there to get to the starting line. And he would be, Hart was usually very flexible about that, so that you could get it finished, as long as you got it done before it got too late, because the noise created a problem for him. Some of the characters that I ran into, Kenny Logan, Bob Sorrell was one of the great characters of this whole picture. He was a bodybuilder of record, and he had a Quonset hut in Harbor City, and it had about 6 or 7 race cars, old Al Barnes' old Austin Healey that he widened 12 inches with a Cadillac motor in it. There was a Ferrari, a really expensive nowadays Ferrari, sitting there moldering away, and cats. He must have had 60 cats in the building. And they were all inbred, so that the hind legs were all dragging around. I mean, it was a sorry sight. But that was Sorrell. And he could hammer a piece of aluminum like nobody's business. He was the Tom Hanna of his day. He made the largest number of pretty bodies. Fats, what was his name? Wayne Ewing was probably the most talented aluminum bender that was doing drag race cars. But he took forever. And you had to get 2 Gunzels to go over to his house and stand there and force him to finish the product. So he did the prettiest stuff. He did the Shark car, Adams and McEwen. He did the Greer Black and Prudhomme car. He did the OCMP car. He did all those pretty cars from that 110-inch wheelbase era.
Were all Wayne Ewing.
Were all Wayne Ewing. And Sorrell was... he came along at 150 inches. That's when the cars started getting longer. He built the Scoundrel from Sandoval, finally. He built the 2 Warden Ware cars. The number of bodies he turned out. And what he'd do, he'd make a buck. He'd decide on what he wanted the shape to be. He'd make the buck, and then he'd send the buck down to California Metal Shaping, and he'd have 3 or 4 bodies hammered at the same time. And so guys, the 2 Warden Ware cars looked like the Joe Winters car, and looked like the Levitt's car. I mean, it was the economy of scale is what it was. And if he was motivated, Sorrell was pretty fast, but it was hard to get him motivated. But not anything like Wayne Ewing. Wayne Ewing was just... he built a car for Cue Ball, and Cue Ball Whale in New Orleans. And Paul Candies had to send these 2 guys out. They came out and got me and said, show us where Wayne is. And we went to Wayne's place and stood there for 2 days while he finished the body. He was a disaster. But he did beautiful stuff. He did a Watson nose for the Indy car. And Watson says, okay, build me 20 of them, because he was building a lot of cars. And Wayne hemmed and hawed around, so Watson went out and made a fiberglass one, and turned out as many cars as he could with that nose on it. And it is, of the era, that is the Indy car of that era. Foyt, Parnelli, Ward, the 2... Rathman brothers all drove Watsons with that terrific 2-nostril nose in the front. And if you really look close at the Greer Black and Prudhomme car, that is the same shape at the very front. Is that it's got that like a little V entrance. It just doesn't have the 2 indentations, but you can see the shape, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Now then. From wearing out all the parts with Madden and then Kegel, I decided to go to work for Lou Bainey at Yeakel Plymouth, because I really needed a job. I had been hanging around working at this and working at that. Woody paid me cash when he paid me. And so Lou was running the Yeakel Plymouth car, and I went to work for his partner, Vince Rossi, at the Yeakel store, and helped run the Yeakel Plymouth car. John Garrison was the engine builder. McEwen was the driver, and the car ran really good. There was no question about it. And I mentioned earlier, I explained to you how when Bainey decided to move on from McEwen and what have you, he went and got Pink and Prudhomme and ran good, won the Spring Nationals, and quit outright after that when he realized that it was a losing proposition even with sponsorships. So he passed. Then I went to work for the magazines, and Johnny Durbin hired me as the managing editor of Drag Racing Magazine. And I really had a good time there. The very first piece I did was on Adams, Rasmussen, and Scott. It was the little gas car, the Beacon Auto car. It was the very first feature I did. And I worked there for about 2 years, and the magazine had a thing called the Top 10. And the Top 10 was kind of done arbitrarily, but with the staff. And Johnny Durbin was responsible for how it came out. I think I told you, I think I've done this portion of the story before in this tape, but let's go briefly about it. The Surfers were chosen as #1, and that moved Roland Leong and the Hawaiian out of first place. And I mentioned it to Roland at the drag races that following Saturday, which was before the magazine came out. And Holly Hedrick had a fit and fired me. And I said, "You can't fire me for doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. Give me a break." He wouldn't have any part of it. So that went away. And I got into Peterson as a technical writer. Did lots of one-off books for them, and then ended up as editor of Hot Rod Industry News. Where I'm headed is to SEMA at this point. That's why I'm shortening it. Put out those magazines, became editor of Hot Rod Industry News, working for Alex Exidius. And in the interim, Bainey got hired by Vic Edelbrock, who was chairman of the board of SEMA, to run the place. And he needed a henchman. And so he recommended me to Vic. Vic hired me. And we started out dealing with the legislation that was really causing the high-performance industry a great deal of grief. There was a rule in Oregon that they were trying to push through that would outlaw any suspension modifications and any custom wheels other than the wheels that came on the car.